I am Chief Roland Willson, West Moberly First Nations. I am located in northeastern BC. My nation is Daniza. We are the Dani people of northeastern BC. Our people, the Daniza people, have been on the ground for over 13,000 years in northeastern BC. We hunted the mammoth that lived there. So we've been there. We are continuing to be there, and we plan on staying much longer. All through our territory, we have signs up all over the place about sour gas, oil and gas activities here and there. We cannot eat the fish. The image on the left is my son. That's his first fish he caught. But we caught it out of the Willson Reservoir, and the Willson Reservoir is contaminated with methyl mercury. So all the fish in the reservoir system has high concentrations of methyl mercury, and a fish this size is very unhealthy to eat. So typically we would have released that fish and let it go back, but he snagged it so bad that it was damaged, we had to take it. The image on the left is a female caribou. It is identified as a species at risk animal that is in eating contaminated soil in a lease site that has not been cleaned up. She's dead. She died. The image on the right is a species at risk protected bison that got into a well site that was not fenced, got her head stuck under the pipes, and they had to put her down in order to get her out of there. That was a species at risk animal. We're not allowed to hunt these animals. We cannot drink the water. So what rivers, waterways that are not affected by the Willson Reservoir and the methyl mercury have coal mines on them with high levels of selenium being dumped in them. So there are signs all through the territory about not being careful not to drink or eat the fish out of the water because of the high levels of mercury that's there. The image on the right of the cabin on the edge of the bank, that's the Willson Reservoir, and it's the sloughing that's been happening since they flooded, went to full pool on the Willson Reservoir. They said when they first considered the Willson Reservoir that would eventually stop. It hasn't stopped. It's been 40 years and it's still sloughing in there, and it's new debris that goes into the water every year. That cabin has since fell into the river, into the reservoir. I apologize for this, but this is what our reality is. This is a dead caribou. This is the last male caribou of the burnt pine caribou herd. When the province issued the mining permit for the mining company to go up there, an illegal permit, because they didn't actually give them the permit, they told them to go ahead and get started and we'll get you the permit. They never did get them the permit. They went up there and built this big pit. And then when we got involved and the court case ensued, they didn't reclaim the pit. They left the pit there. And the male, there was 2 caribou left up there, and the male of the 2 got too close to the edge of the pit and fell in the pit and died. We discovered him that spring in the bottom of the pit. He fell far enough that he actually broke one of the antlers off his head there. That burnt pine caribou herd has now become extinct. There's a herd in the south end of the province called the Selkirk herd. They believe they're functionally extinct now. There's only 3 left, and they're all females. We can't hunt the caribou because there's not enough of them there. The federal and provincial governments in their recovery program are not recovering the caribou to levels of harvesting. They're recovering the levels to levels of sustainability. They want to stop the depletion or the wipeout of the caribou. But they're not curtailing development. They're not doing any recovery program of the land, rebuilding, the habitat zones that they're in. What they're doing is flying around in helicopters and shooting all the wolves and protecting the high elevation habitat, and not understanding that in the spring the caribous come out of the mountains and back down into the valleys and live in the valleys, and they're getting annihilated down there. I am Chief Roland Willson, West Moberly First Nations. I am located in northeastern BC. My nation is Daniza. We are the Dani people of northeastern BC, the heart of oil and gas, forestry, coal mining, wind farm, large hydroelectric projects, Site C Dam. I don't know, hope everybody here knows what that is. Our presentation was put together real quick to talk about the changes to Bill C-69. So thank you for inviting us there. Thank you for considering what we have to say. The current issue with the BC and federal government's environmental assessment is that there is nothing in there about First Nations. And when we go through what's being recommended now, there is no consideration of First Nations. What we hear and see is they'll take it into consideration. Well, we've seen what consideration gets us. What does that mean? You'll take it into consideration. Is it the intent of the environmental assessment to unjustifiably infringe the treaty? That's a question that I have for you guys. Because we're not in here. The First Nations are not in here anywhere. We should be at the very beginning. The treaty is a constitutional document. It's part of the Constitution of Canada. But yet we don't show up until the very end of it. After permits have been released, after studies have been done. This is where we find ourselves in Site C.
If FPIC is adopted, as it appears the Liberal government will do, what do you understand FPIC to mean? Is it a veto? Is it some kind of collaboration between a nation, in a nation-to-nation discussion? What does it look like?
I can express what we've gone through. Site C is a prime example. We were never opposed to the construction, to the development of the energy. What we were opposed to is the means of creating the energy. Site C, flooding of the last chunk of Peace River Valley we had. We were never given the opportunity to have that discussion. So free, prior, and informed consent for us is be sitting at the table before the decision gets made. They made their decision to build Site C, then came and talked to us. That becomes a mitigative process, right? They've already decided that they're going to do the project. We had no other choice at that point down. Now we find ourselves in court trying to stop this thing. There are proven alternatives to this project that we never got a chance to have a talk about, that are now identified being better solutions than to what Site C was. So FPIC, I agree, it depends on the project. You can't just, it's not a veto, but Site C was not a good project. It's not a good project, not by any means. It's been proven that it's probably the worst thing that we could be doing, but we never got a chance to sit down and talk about that. We were told we're building Site C, what are your concerns? And we'll take them into consideration. Speaking through experience, you're allowed to infringe on the treaty if it's justified. That's law. And unjustified, that's why I asked the question, is your intent to unjustifiably infringe the treaty? There is a test that's supposed to be performed called the Sparrow Analysis Test to justify whether or not the impact is justifiable. That has never happened. We were told that it didn't need to happen on Site C. Site C is the largest infrastructure project BC has ever seen. It's $12 billion. If that project does not justify a Sparrow Analysis Test, what project does? It's a death by 1,000 cuts. You can minimalize everything if you have the pen to do it with. They structured the whole thing away from a justification process. We were saying, let's look at alternatives, and they said no. Right? So they unjustified. They know now that there is no need for the power for Site C. There's no reason to destroy the last remaining piece of that river, but here we are. We're in court now because of this. A little First Nation, two little First Nations in northeastern BC have to fight Canada, BC, and BC Hydro, a Crown corporation with billions of dollars in their pockets to try and justify a development that's not needed.